I was a senior in high school, this would have been in 2007, I was out of the blue contacted one day by this random guy on MySpace. I vaguely recognized him but didn't know him. He told me that he knew me from school and that I had tutored him in math a couple of times. This should have been my first red flag that something was off. I hate math, and I've never tutored anyone in it. I told him he was mistaken, but I tried to be nice to him and we struck up a friendly conversation. Soon the guy, Brian, started talking to me at school. It started off pretty innocently. He was giving me more attention than I wanted from him, but I was flattered and didn't think anything of it at the time. He was a couple of years younger than me, and I figured he had developed a crush on me primarily because we were both kind of odd compared to the other kids in our high school. It was a very small school. My graduating class was about 40 people, and he and I were two of a very small number of alternative kids there. He was pretty emo, while I tended a bit more towards punk. Both of us loved My Chemical Romance. I feared he was just into me because there weren't many other girls with similar interests. Before long, he started waiting for me at my locker. Every day between every class, he started following me around before school and during lunch. He started coming to my performances. I was in drama and choir. I tried to be polite, but started avoiding him. I would go to the local grocery store to eat lunch, even though it was more expensive, because underclassmen weren't allowed to leave campus. The situation continued to escalate to the point where he was harassing me every chance I failed to avoid him. If he was waiting for me at my locker, he would say some explicit things to me, tell me what he wanted to do to me, and tell me that when he was with his girlfriend, that he wished she was me. At homecoming, he left his girlfriend waiting awkwardly while he came to tell me that he really wanted us all to get together. Luckily, my girlfriends were with me and came over as soon as they noticed him talking to me, which made him scurry away. As quickly as it started, it was over. One day he stopped showing up at school. I was relieved but curious. After about a month of him being gone, my friend mentioned him in front of my dad, who was also the principal of my high school. My dad questioned me about what happened, and I ended up telling him the whole story. He seemed really troubled. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me why Brian had been absent from school recently. Apparently not long after homecoming, Brian had strapped some fireworks to a cat and set them off. The cat exploded, and Brian laughed. He got caught and was sent to juvie, and was committed to a psychiatric facility by his parents after he was released. I don't know what happened to him after that. When I was a freshman in high school, I met Alex. Now, 10 years later, I couldn't tell you why I was so drawn to him, or why I got so attached. He was homely and odd and quite frequently smelled bad. There was a darker undercurrent that ran below his surface, and I thought I saw unspoken sadness that matched mine, and maybe as a naive 15-year-old, I had the stereotypical, we can save each other from our pain, fantasy. He wasn't the only boy giving me attention at the time. In fact, he barely even gave me that, since he played me hot and cold, emphasis on the cold, but he was the one I wanted. Every time I would start to pull away and give up because he was clearly uninterested, he would pop up, calling me cute and making comments about how seeing me brightens his day. Then he would be back to pursuing someone else. I was 15 and naive and hurt, but still finally had enough. So I decided I was done. He caught wind of this and ended up asking me to be his girlfriend later that same day. I was caught off guard but thought, finally, he must have just needed time to make a move. He and I dated for 2 years, and he was a hurricane the entire time. One example, his phone would be off for days at a time, he rarely went to school, and I just wouldn't hear from him. I would finally call his mom because I was worried about not hearing from him at all for 3, 4, 5 days, and she would tell me that she hadn't seen him either. When he finally turned his phone back on, he would spit venom at me and call me crazy because I spammed his phone. I would be in tears and try to explain to him that I was worried because I hadn't heard from him in days, and neither had his mother, and then he would call me a few other names and hang up on me and turn his phone off. The abuse came in many ways, but disappearing and then cussing me out and calling me names when I voiced how uncomfortable it made me, that was his favorite. I kept trying to break up with him, but whenever I did that, suddenly he was calling me crying and saying that I was the love of his life and that he was going to end his life if I left him. After 2 years, I finally had enough and ended it for good. I told him I was done, and I ignored his fruitless threats. He kept begging. School was out for the summer, so he couldn't find me there, which meant he kept showing up at my house. Afternoon, evening, middle of the night, it didn't matter. He would toss bits of bark that my mom had in a planter in the front yard at my bedroom window. He would sit out there for a long time trying to get me to talk to him. I didn't know what to do. I thought he would give up and that it would be okay soon. One day I was walking home from work. I was a block away from my house and Alex came sidling up next to me in his car, pleading with me to talk to him. I told him I had nothing more to say. "Then let me talk, please," he begged. He was crying. I had no intention of getting back together with him, but I still hated seeing him hurt. I agreed to let him say what he wants so he could get closure. I sat in the car and told him to talk. He started babbling incoherently and kept trying to make me feel bad for abandoning him. I told him the conversation was over and I was leaving. He locked the doors, and as I went to manually push the lock on my door up, he grabbed my arm and told me I wasn't leaving. I panicked. I smacked him and shoved him away from me and scrambled out of the car and ran to the rest of the block home. He continued to lurk, spammed my inbox, drove by my house and place of employment. I ended up rebounding and started dating someone new. He was Alex's complete opposite and made me feel happy and light. However, once Alex got news of this, he flipped out. He went ballistic. The calls and texts increased both in frequency and in level of mania. He started hanging out right outside of the store I was working at. It was a small store in the mall, so I could see him, just standing there staring at me. Management had to call mall security a few times, but he always came back. Eventually his texts got threatening. He started saying things about how he hoped my new boyfriend was prepared, and he said that he was willing to go to jail to have me. My mom panicked and believed that I was on the verge of being kidnapped or assaulted. We had gone to the cops a couple of times, but they said they couldn't do anything because he technically hadn't broken any laws. We took the threatening messages to them, and they said that they would start to file a restraining order and go warn him that he couldn't go near or talk to me, or he was in violation of the order of protection. He kept showing up anyway. One night around midnight, the doorbell rang. My mom was confused and asked if I was expecting anyone. I told her no. She opened the door, and there on the front step was a card, a rose, and a burning candle. We glanced up and down the street and didn't see anyone, and we were immediately spooked because there wasn't enough time for him to ring the doorbell and get out of sight already. You could see a long way down both sides of the street, unless he was hiding in the trees along the house. This went on for a while. He kept following me and showing up at my work, which means he kept getting visited by the cops, and his friends even got involved and started threatening me for what I was doing to him. Eventually the order of protection was placed, and all at once, everything stopped. But my paranoia and fear lasted for a long time after that. In all honesty, I've had a lot of creepy encounters, known a lot of normal people that ended up doing bad things. Sometimes I feel like I'm cursed to make friends with rough edges, and this whole situation started when I was a sophomore in high school. I showed up to school one day and noticed a new boy in my class. I was your atypical goth girl, and this guy was a teenage bad boy dream. Piercings, leather jacket, reading some sort of obscure novel. I was hooked at first sight. I introduced myself, and soon enough we were dating. He will be referred to as X for the rest of the story. Now, a little background. I was brought up in an alcoholic parent's home. There were many times I was living by myself or with a friend because my parent was in the hospital. Despite the chaos in my life, I still managed to go to school every day and pull decent enough grades. After one time too many, however, I was left for 2+ months living alone. Instead of coming home to an empty house, I asked X if I could live with him since he was closer to school. He and his parents happily welcomed me into their home. At this point in the relationship, maybe 5 months in, we were phasing out of the puppy love stage and I was starting to notice some serious red flags. X was very mental and started cutting regularly. His parents were very heavy drug users. There would be times I would try talking to X and he would literally stare off into space and not notice my existence. He was never mean or abusive towards me, but I could definitely tell something was unhooking in him. When we started living together, it started to become very evident something was very, very wrong. He started to tell me he thought he was possessed by a demon and couldn't control himself. We both spiraled into moderate drug usage. I started skipping school, and he started seeing more demons. In all truth, I hadn't realized what a hole I had dug myself into by living with him. One night, we ended up falling asleep after smoking a bowl and watching a movie. It was a big house, and we were living in the garden-level basement, 2 or so floors below his parents and siblings. Around midnight, I was awoken by the most frightening screech I've ever heard. X was right next to me in bed, contorting, convulsing, and screaming bloody murder. At first, I thought it was a seizure. I've had friends with seizures before, and did not interfere, only looking for one of our cell phones to call 911. I got up out of bed, and he looked me dead in the eye. The blood drained from my veins, and never have I seen such hate. Everything seemed to happen in flashes from there. He never broke eye contact as he slowly rose from the bed. It almost looked as if though he was a marionette on a set of strings, pulled up with sunken shoulders. A half smile formed on his face as his body twitched. He started walking towards me. I cannot describe how terrified I was, cornered in the room opposite the door. I felt my ears swell and ring. He started screeching at me, coming within a centimeter of my face, never breaking his gaze. I started pushing him, yelling at him to cut it out, but it was like trying to push a stone statue. He wouldn't move. He finally started talking, ranting about the demon and not making a single word of sense. As bizarre as it was, I knew he was having some sort of mental episode. I truly did fear for my life and needed to escape. Suddenly, I felt as if though I was sucked back into the moment and my senses were incredibly acute. I noticed the window we had cracked open earlier. I pushed the window back, punched through the screen, and climbed out as he stood silently staring at me. I'm pretty sure I stayed outside for an hour hyperventilating before I decided to ring the doorbell. One of his parents answered, very confused, and set me up with a blanket on the couch on the first floor with no questions asked. In the morning, X came up and acted as if nothing had happened. No matter how much I pestered him about it, it was as if it had all been a bad dream. I made arrangements to stay with another friend that day and broke up with X a week after, once I was actually able to face him again. Sometimes I wonder if it had been some sort of sick joke to get me out of this house or out of the relationship, but I watched unshocked in the years after as he fell into severe drug abuse and mental illness. At one point I went to a school counselor and told them how worried I was for him, but it only made him hold a grudge against me. After everything that had happened, I really started to feel sorry for him, and sort of weirdly forgave him for what he did. He tried contacting me a few times after everything that happened, but as the years went by, I heard less and less. Last thing I heard was he was addicted to meth, living on the streets. This goes back to when I was 15 and a sophomore in high school. I had a few friends and would walk by myself to and from most of my classes because small talk made, and still does, make me nervous thanks to some anxiety issues. I was walking to class one day and this guy, we'll call him Creeper, came out of nowhere and started walking next to me. He was a bit too close for comfort, so I moved over, but he followed. He was so close to me his arm was brushing against my shoulder. For context, I'm 5'1" and 93 pounds, and this guy was at least 62, 180 pounds, and probably a year or two older. I had some bad experiences with strange men in the past, so I was getting pretty uneasy. He finally decided to introduce himself. "Hey, you're Donna, right?" Of course I was taken aback, since I had no clue who this dude was and had never seen him before. "Do I know you?" I asked. What he said next gave me chills and still creeps me out to this day. "No, but I know you." Just like that, he turned and walked away. I kid you not, he actually said that. I saw him the next morning when I was sitting with my friends and waiting for the first bell to ring. I pointed him out to them and asked who he was. They didn't know him either. The bell rang and we all went our separate ways. I stuck my headphones in my ears and turned on some music for the walk to first period. I felt an arm brushing against my shoulder. I looked out of the corner of my eye and saw the creeper there, staring at me with this weird grin. I moved away from him, and just like before, he moved right with me. He pulled my headphones off and started asking me for my number. When I told him no, he started begging like he was trying to be cute. "Please, can I have your number? You're so pretty. I just want to be able to call you." I said nothing. Then he started asking me if I had a boyfriend and if that was why I wouldn't talk to him. I got to my class and hurried in, and he stood by the door staring and grinning for a few seconds before he left. This went on for several weeks. He started turning up everywhere I went. I would even take detours to try and throw him off, but he eventually picked up on those as well. Every day he would ask if I had a boyfriend and if I would just give him my number. After telling him no multiple times, I eventually gave up and just started giving him the cold shoulder. One afternoon, I was walking to the bus parking lot to catch my ride home. Suddenly, my headphones were tugged out of my ears, and lo and behold, there's Creeper. "You never gave me your number," he whined. I put my earbuds back in only to have them yanked out again. "Why won't you give me your number? Come on, haven't I been nice to you?" I hopped on my bus and thanked the gods he didn't follow. That night, I got a text message from an unknown number. It said, "Hey," with a winky face. I asked who it is, and soon after get the reply that it's Creeper, and he asked if I was a virgin. Now I'm sitting here thinking, how did he get my cell phone number? I did have a Facebook and a MySpace, but neither one of them had my email or phone number visible to anyone but my friends. The next morning, I called the phone company and asked them to block his number so he couldn't contact me. The next day, I was walking between the two buildings of the high school on my way to a midday class, and he shows up again. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Why won't you message me back?" I told him I couldn't talk because I was going to be late for class and walked faster. He got up and raised his voice a bit. "Why won't you answer my calls? I want you to be my girlfriend." I ignored him, and I guess he was tired of that because he got really angry. He ran up behind me and grabbed the handle of my backpack and the hood of my jacket with the same hand and yanked me backwards. I reached forward and grabbed the handle of the heavy metal door of the next building. I was screaming at him at this point. "Let me go! Just leave me alone, okay?" He was still trying to pull me behind the building, and I was about to lose my grip on the door handle when I guess he realized that I'd created a scene. He let go and nervously said something along the lines that he was just playing and to stop being so serious. After that, he would try to message me on Facebook once in a while, but I blocked him there too. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since. In high school, I had a male best friend. It was a known fact that he was super into me and people would give me crap all the time for leading him on. Never once did I try to become romantically involved with him. Was not into him like that. So he starts intensely dating my best friend. They have a frighteningly abusive relationship for years. He physically harms her, and I hate him. Then we all moved to the same city just by chance, and she admits to me that she found a folder on his computer when they were dating that was just pictures of me, from Facebook I guess, just all in one folder. Then I randomly see him at a show in Brooklyn where he met my then boyfriend. Then he starts contacting me. Had no idea he had my number still, but he would only text me at 4 a.m., saying incoherent nonsense about how thick I was, using more vulgar terminology, and how he used to lust over me in high school, and how I almost ruined his relationship with my BFF because of my body, and all sorts of gross and crude remarks. Then when I asked him to stop, he said he needed help because he had a drug problem and he was going to end his life if I didn't talk to him. This went on for a while. Not sure why I didn't block his number. I told him I would call the police, but I guess I was legitimately afraid he would hurt himself. Fast forward 2 years later, it's starting again. This time I live on the other side of the country. Same text at 4 a.m., his time on the opposite coast, about me and how I defined his ideal woman. Gross and not flattering. I tell him to stop, and I will block him and call the police. He begs me to not stop talking to him because he needs to talk to me. Legitimately afraid he's going to just show up on my street, wouldn't put it past him. My boyfriend is angry and wants to get involved. I'm almost to the point of letting my boyfriend text him just to make him stop. I blocked him on Facebook, then I instantly get an Instagram request. Enough is enough. What do you think I should do? This happened in 2005. Me and my older brother lived with our single mom. I was a freshman in high school and my brother a senior. We had a pretty normal life. Our mom made good money as a lawyer and me and my brother were happy. But one day, one of my mom's cases put our whole family in danger. My mom, being a lawyer, often prosecuted people in our city. In this case, she was prosecuting a man who had assaulted a woman. The man was found guilty and given 20 years in prison. Little did we know the son of this man went to me and my brother's high school. The family was very angry at my mother, especially the son, Kevin. He vowed to make my mom's life a living hell. Me and my brother knew nothing about this though. Our mom never talked about her work with us, and threats are nothing new for lawyers, so no one thought anything of it. On the day it happened, it was like any other. I, being a shy and introverted girl, always went to the bathroom when no one else was using the stalls. This was a mistake. Our school walls were actually made out of glass, so anyone in the classroom could see you walking through the hallway. I know I hate the idea as well. Kevin must have seen me that day as I was walking to the bathroom. I was playing on my phone in one of the stalls when I heard the door crack open. Usually I'd brush it off as another girl who needed to fix her hair or use the bathroom. But this time something felt off. A feeling of dread and fear welled up in me, and instinctively I pulled my feet up off the ground. They laughed and whispered my last name maliciously, and almost instantly I knew he was a boy, and almost instantly it got worse. He started banging his hands on the stalls, slowly getting closer towards mine. Now absolutely terrified, my mind raced with horrific thoughts of what he would do to me. Blinded with fear, I made a horrible decision to run past him towards the door. I jumped out of the stall and sprinted as fast as I could. This unfortunately didn't work. He cut me off and pushed me into the tile floor. What I looked up to still haunts me to this day. Kevin standing above me, his face covered with a vicious smile. I stood up meekly and took a step back. "What do you want?" I managed to whimper out, my face now covered in tears. He didn't answer. He just took one intimidating step forward and pulled out a small knife. The next part is a bit of a blur. He said something about not screaming and tried to back me up against the wall. Unfortunately for him, I kicked and screamed and punched, though I don't think it did much. I was a small, scrawny 105-pound 14-year-old girl, while he was a giant 17-year-old football player. I don't think I would have gotten away if it wasn't for the fact that we were in a bathroom. Two girls walked in the midst of the chaos, giggling and talking. Through their screams and Kevin's surprise, I was able to bite onto Kevin's hand and escape his grasp. I ran into the bathroom screaming and crying for help. My first thought being to run to my older brother's English room. I trudged down the hallway slowly. Now that my adrenaline had gone down, I realized another danger. A hole in my shoulder and lower stomach was gushing blood. I hadn't felt it until now, but it seemed through our struggle, Kevin had stabbed me with his knife. Kids and teachers were now peering through the glass and coming out into the hallway to see what was happening. The two girls who had saw us in the bathroom were screaming, drawing a crowd. I started getting confused in the crowd of kids. My vision was getting blurred, and I felt lightheaded. The loss of blood probably affecting me. Everyone was screaming and running around, and the teacher's attempts to calm everyone was failing. Luckily, I found my brother through this. If I hadn't, I might have died. Running into him, he grabbed my shoulder, making me look up. This part is also a blur, but my friends and brother told me what happened next. My brother told me I had slumped over onto the ground right as I found him. My best friend also in the hallway told me my brother had yelled something like, "Help! My sister's bleeding!" This got the attention of everyone, and some teachers ran over to me and my brother. Students started calling 911 as a teacher and my brother tried to stop the bleeding. My brother has a big temper, so he started yelling at everyone and asking who had done this. The girls thought Kevin might still be in the bathroom, so my brother ran over there. I wish my brother hadn't gone to the bathroom though, because all of the other kids followed him. Kevin apparently hadn't moved from the spot near the wall, and he hadn't even tried to hide the knife. My brother then proceeded to try and beat up Kevin. Luckily, though, classmates held him back. I was taken to the hospital, and Kevin was arrested. Kevin had actually damaged some organs when he stabbed me near my bladder, so I had to have immediate surgery with only a 40% chance of survival. They then put me in an induced coma because of the pain, and so I wouldn't rip any equipment connected to my body. I survived, but was in a coma for a month. When I was taken out of the coma, it was a tough recovery, partly because of the coma, but also because of the trauma of almost being stabbed to death. The school had covered up the story by the time I woke up. No one was allowed to talk about it, but the kids spread rumors anyways. I decided to recover for the rest of the year before going back to school, and then I returned to my everyday life. Though things have not been the same since that experience, my brother became really overprotective, and my mom quit her job, and Kevin was never seen again. I also have had recurring nightmares of Kevin since the incident. Now that I'm an adult, things have settled down for our family. And you know what? Even though Kevin tried to kill me and put me in a coma, I hope he's got himself figured out now. He obviously needed help, and none was given to him. Kevin, if you hear this, answer this question. Are you afraid of knives now? Because I'm afraid of bathrooms. I went to high school with a guy, Bob. Bob and I were never close, but we sometimes hung out in the same circle. He was in band and I was in drama. Bob was always a little off. I think he may have had a learning disability, and maybe that resulted in him being socially awkward. Anyway, by sophomore year, he was dating a friend of mine, so I saw more of him. By junior year, he dropped out and tried to get his GED. That was the last I heard of Bob, for a while at least. Fast forward to the summer 2 years after graduating. Bob calls me up out of the blue and asks me to go camping with him and a friend of his that I don't know. He says that he knows a spot that is totally secluded and that we would be hiking 5 miles a day. He really tries to sell me on this. He insists that it'll be awesome and fun and that we'll bond. As I listen to him, something from the pit of my stomach says, no, don't do this. Never being especially close to him and not having seen him for 2 years, I thought that it was weird for Bob to call me up, and I declined his offer. The following November, Bob is on the news because he had killed his partner. He worked for an armored van service and stolen the money in the armored van. There were news updates about him fleeing out of the state. He was finally caught on a routine traffic stop, I believe. Anyway, when his case went to trial, his journal was entered into evidence. The prosecutor said that Bob wrote that he and his friend, the same one that was going to go camping, hatched a plan to become professional assassins. I believe that the camping trip he invited me on was all a ruse so that he could get me in a secluded place so that he and his friend could practice how to murder someone, namely me. Hey guys, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed these stories and wish to support the channel further, join me over at patreon.com/letsread, where for only $1 a month, you have early access to all future narrations on this channel a day early, and lots of other awesome rewards. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again soon.